I like to step back as far as I can to understand what the writer's aesthetic is. So I don't want to jump in and in any way impose my aesthetic. Sometimes it takes a few poems, sometimes it can take many poems to discover that. And I don't feel that I have definitive answers. I feel this is always in flux. And so when I make suggestions, they're usually in the form of questions. I had 4 students this semester. One was doing the essay, and the other 3 were finishing their books. So it was a thesis semester. And it just happened this time that all 4 were women, and radically different aesthetics, radically different composition processes. And it was an absolute delight to figure out each one of those and find the best working relationship with them. This is someone who really wanted to court mystery in her poetry, and she didn't want that taken away in any way. And so our challenge was to figure out how to leave the mystery in, and we approach it really collaboratively. You suggest something and maybe that won't work, and you'll come back again and suggest something else, and then all of a sudden, yes, it worked, and there's this tremendous excitement on both parts. And so in this case, what we did was we divided the manuscript into 33 poems, 11 chapters, so it was 3 poems per chapter, and then I asked her to come up with a question for each chapter, so that the question would shape the chapter, and then the poems would answer the question. But she wanted to come, like Emily Dickinson, obliquely to her topic, and so this enabled her to do it. So for instance, the first chapter was about sleep, and so she had 3 different takes on what sleep could possibly be. So we were quite excited about that. And I think one of the things that made that work is, I would say in my own aesthetic, probably with most poets, we're courting the ineffable. We're really throwing ourselves into the unknown. And it's very exciting when you're doing that with a student and you're on that journey together, trying to come up with, and you're sort of sometimes holding hands, through the process. The conversation, absolutely. That's why we're here. That's why I think people come to Pacific for some reason, either because they have jobs that occupy their entire lives, or I just sat at a table for lunch with my half of my workshop, and what each person said was they felt such joy in their lives and such great curiosity, and they wanted to do everything, and they didn't know how to give poetry priority to that. And so that's really what we talked about, is how to take poetry into the marrow and make it really the primary thing in your life, and allow all of these other passions to feed that. But that's the challenge, and it's absolutely addictive. The students become teary-eyed when they get to that last semester. They say it's bittersweet. One said it, I feel as though, and this was from a very demure young woman who does not take drugs, but she said, I feel as though you're taking my heroin away. And the conversation is very compelling. And then the challenge afterwards is how can you carry on that conversation? And for those of us who teach, we know how to carry on the conversation because we're here. And I think the first thing, the most important thing, is that writing is a conversation and it's a process, and it's a really sacred process. The second thing is, how are you going to enter community? How are you going to build community? And I think that students who come here get a really, really good idea of how to build community, because I think this is, I've been in many, many, many writing communities. I direct one, but I think this is the sweetest, most nurturing community, writing community, that I've ever been part of. You know you're in a good community, and this is what I know about this one. I have a very public life, but I'm an extremely shy, extremely reclusive person, and I feel great comfort in this community. You know, there's tremendous support and acceptance of what each of us does. And if somebody makes a mistake, there's room for that. There's room to try something and it doesn't quite work, and discover, hey, that didn't quite work, and discover sometimes by deeper attention, by really learning to almost listen to the way listening to criticism is almost listening to akin to listening to a symphony. You know, you listen to the breath pauses, you watch the body language, and so forth. And I think we become really attuned to that. One of the things that we talk a great deal about when I do a thesis review, for instance, and I'm doing 3 of them this time, I ask them to bring a card to me, and on that card to write 5 things they're going to do when they leave this program, and then when they leave, to keep that in a prominent place, so that they have a checklist that they have to look back and see if they correspond. There are many different ways. Reviewing books, asking writers to be in conversation with them, asking well-known writers to be in conversation, publishing that work. The students here read 20 books per each semester, and they write commentaries on those. And it turns out that many of those commentaries are quite good, and so often we encourage them to, in addition to doing their own writing, to consider entering and taking a visible place in I mean, you become part of a community by contributing to the community. And so to take a visible place by doing that type of work as well as their own writing. That does many things. One thing, it helps articulate their aesthetic to an outside world. If you look at a well-known and a well-respected poet, you're going to, if you go to the library, you're going to see they have a body of work. And usually it's poetry, but it's also essays, and it might be reviews and interviews and so forth.